To another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. It's Daniel here, as always, joined by my brother Sean. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going?
Not too bad, Sean. I guess there's no where we can really do this podcast other than predominantly talking about United Liverpool and that sensational results. 5-0 away from home at Old Trafford, United's joint heaviest defeat in the Premier League. Your initial thoughts, the results, and did you kind of see it coming? Or
It's a weird one, because for a lot of people, um, it's a weird one because you never know what you're gonna get. You know, they always say with a derby day or a big game, the form goes out the window. But Man United last season, in particular, have been part of a lot of nil-all games. I think they drew 9 games nil-all last year, but certainly in some of those bigger games, and with Liverpool, you you felt like a point wouldn't have been the worst result for them at Old Trafford because it's a difficult place to go for them. But I don't think anyone was expecting 5-0 bar Paul Scholes. They absolutely obliterated them. Liverpool were so clinical in that first part of the game, and it's a real shock because I thought the result in midweek would galvanise them a little bit, would change their perception, maybe change their belief for Manchester United, give them that little bit of confidence, that bit of luck. It was said that when Ollie's under pressure, they always find a result, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen on Sunday, and they got torn to shreds. They got embarrassed really, and it's probably as low as those players will ever be. And the fact that for the last half an hour, United with 10 men, and Liverpool, they didn't even have to do anything. They didn't have to press to get more goals, which they could have done. Jurgen Klopp kind of hinted at that in his interview, that they just didn't want to get any injuries, and that they did pick up one, but they were just too good, class of their own compared to Manchester United. And where a lot are saying it really is going to be a four-way push for the league title, and people are saying, look, we haven't had this in years, and it's great. And I think after 9 games, having United only playing United of last year's top four, United only playing Liverpool from last year's top four, I think it's definitely a three-way title race now.
yeah, that goes without saying. Well, unless there's possibly a change of management, because you can't deny the world class players involved with Manchester United. But I guess they kind of get caught in the middle, and this has kind of been done to death with Sky and BBC, and it's rare the kind of same point gets brought up in terms of the tactical kind of element of it. But you got caught between trying to press and a counter-attack team. It's like Bruno was going off on his own little runs. Greenwood was half-heartedly doing it. And then you had a case of Wan-Bissaka. And you highlighted this to me just watching the Wan-Bissaka for the first Liverpool goal, and Andy Robertson having a 6 or 7 yard behind, and he ended up beating him by about 20 or 30 yards. And I don't want to single out Wan-Bissaka because he wasn't the problem, but they just seem to be caught in this. It seemed like, looking from the outside in, that the players want to play a certain way, and Ollie knows the counter-attacking way. But even he was kind of talking himself up in the interview about, we want to dominate this game from the start. There's a lot of talk that they kind of got caught in the hype, and they're kind of paying a lot of attention to the outside, saying that they don't play front foot football. And it just seems to be really poorly coached, really poorly managed team. And yeah, I just haven't really seen a team that obviously being caught so in between two minds about how to play a game. And what happened is basically Liverpool, without playing particularly well, they played ground. They just played through them, and it's so much time and space. And you saw that with the opening 4 goals in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many incidents from having watched back a bit of the game. There were so many incidents where Liverpool, if they just made that extra pass or they got an extra moment, I mean, it felt like watching that game. Any one of the 10 outfield Liverpool players could have got their name on the score sheet. For every one of the goals, it feels like there was another option open to them. Um, they were given so much time and space on the ball. It would worry you. And obviously OIe Gunnar Solskjaer doesn't have the experience or maybe the coaching capabilities of the other couple of managers in the Premier League. But his biggest strength, a Manchester United manager, has been away from home, where they picked up results even despite being a couple of goals down, particularly last season. And where they've always fell in his reign has been home against teams, and particularly against sides that maybe sit deep and don't engage you high up the pitch and don't give you much space. But a couple of times with United this season, particularly in the Champions League, their Champions League performances have been pretty appalling, and they played like in a Champions League game. They were trying to get around the Liverpool players, and Liverpool players just had too much quality to pick passes around them and create spaces. And Liverpool's fullbacks at times, then their wingers, they just felt like there was always that pass open to them. There was always an option, and United couldn't get around the pitch. They didn't have a good shape defensively for that. Um, and when you're playing against Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, who are both so influential for Liverpool, you almost need a plan to stop that, to counteract them. And the fact that Wan-Bissaka a couple of times was going to press Robertson, and he was creating a massive gap between him and Lindelof, and they were just getting exposed down those sides of the defenders. When you have what OIe Gunnar Solskjaer has at his disposal, with his two centre backs that he started on Sunday, both of them not being the best in kind of wide areas or one-on-one defending, then you'd be really worried as to why, or you'd be alarmed as to why United went to do that, went to kind of press, if you like, if they, half-arsedly did it at times. But that's when Liverpool got joy, because they're so good at that. They know how to play against that, and they created those massive gaps in between fullback and centre half, and they just got obliterated. Really got open up so many times in that first half, and Liverpool. The difference between Liverpool and maybe an Atalanta is the quality that Salah and Jota and Firmino and guys like this have, and they took full advantage.
Yeah, it's amazing. I guess, like you said earlier, Paul Scholes was probably the only one who saw it coming in that sort of sense. But for those watching us on the Twitter stream, comments don't come through on Twitter anymore, but do get us on YouTube if you want to contribute to the podcast. We've so much to talk about, really, Sean. But just give people an update on the topics we'll be talking about. There's Gary Neville, there's Paul Scholes. I know Sean wants to touch on a bit of Jermaine Defoe, and should he be doing punditry, live punditry when his team's playing at the same time. There's Graham Souness, there's Jamie Carragher, there's United next fixtures, there's Harry Maguire. So do let us know your thoughts on a lot of those topics, because we could be here all night really kind of talking on that sort of thing. But maybe going back to the individual side of things, Sean, and I guess I don't want to spend too long on the Ronaldo situation, but is that a big problem into why OIe decided to play this way, or kind of got caught in the middle? Because, if Ronaldo's not at the club, United can kind of maybe set up a little bit more defensively. Is that overly harsh on Ronaldo? Because he just looked a frustrated figure at times, and obviously possibly should have got red carded, and if he did get that red card, I think a lot more people would be talking about Ronaldo. Is it too soon to say that transfer was the wrong decision? Like, he's got the goals, but in these big games, are United at times carrying a player like that? Or, I know he can still do it, and he's incredible. His goal scoring is unbelievable. That maybe OIe's not getting the best out of him. Or how would you go about trying to get this Ronaldo in? Because it just seems to me at times you're like, where should we take Ronaldo off here now if United are trying to win a game, or how do you go about it?
Well, I think it's a weird one. I think I'd have loved to have known if OIe Gunnar Solskjaer wanted Ronaldo, or if the potential for him to arrive was kind of put on him. And judging by the timeline, I think the Ronaldo signing was above OIe Gunnar Solskjaer, because when Ronaldo signed, Solskjaer would have lost an awful lot of control. He would have lost control within the dressing room. He would have lost control within the media, and he would have lost control in the fact that Ronaldo signing was so big for Manchester United that he's almost bigger than the club in that sense. I even heard it during the game with Liverpool 5-0 up and they're singing Viva Ronaldo chants, and it's this kind of pandemonium that's going on. And then I just think Solskjaer has lost a little bit of control over that. You've got someone in the dressing room who at 36 years of age is, was he 5-time Ballon d'Or winner, 4-time Champions League winner, or whatever it is. He's been there, done it all. And you're bringing him in, and it's almost like that expectation goes up another level. And OIe Gunnar Solskjaer was put under pressure, and he has lost that control because of the signing. So I don't necessarily think if Solskjaer went back knowing what he does now, whether he'd take him or not. Of course, he's a brilliant finisher and he's a brilliant striker. But it just feels like everything is a little bit too much at the moment for them. Now, that being said, there's no denying he's having a positive impact, because he's getting goals and he's been the match winner in a couple of games already. But there is something lingering. He's one of them players now that when he doesn't score, or when he's not up for it, he's a difficult watch. He doesn't contribute an awful lot during open play. He's kind of in the mold of someone like an Aubameyang or maybe even an Aguero when they don't score, particularly Aguero before Guardiola, when they don't score, they don't necessarily do an awful lot because they aren't the best without the ball. Now you can maybe put Lukaku in that. Now, when you have someone of Ronaldo's quality and you're looking to win games and you've big games coming, and it feels like United, especially looking ahead to their pictures, they have a big game coming every couple of days. You're going to need Ronaldo. Ronaldo doesn't want to sit on the bench. You saw his reaction against Everton, and I think with the signing, I just think Ollie's lost that control that he had before Ronaldo happened. And like I said, when you finish second in the league and you sign, a World Cup and Champions League winning centre half in Varane, you sign one of the best young talents in Europe, Jadon Sancho, and then you sign one of the greatest players of all time, Cristiano Ronaldo, and you are where you are after 9 games, having only played Liverpool. Then the questions have to be answered, and that's where I think is the problem. Is Solskjaer has just lost that little bit of control, and that's all you need. It's that kind of bump on the road that has just knocked them at the minute, and it's knocked them so far back that they're unrecognisable. You can't recognise this United team, and that's a massive worry.
Yeah, for me, and we got a comment from Connor Swords in on YouTube saying all the players feel like they have to pass to Ronaldo. He's always occupying the left half space instead of being in the box, and is then kind of blocking the likes of Rashford and Luke Shaw. I guess Ronaldo right now, if you're looking at the perfect team for Ronaldo, a 36-year-old Ronaldo, it's a team that has 60 to 70% possession. And I think that he might have been, again, outside looking in, that he might have been the leader trying to get United to play a little bit more on the front foot so they're getting more of the ball, because at the end of the day, Ronaldo will get more goals in that result. But it was even interesting seeing Chiellini's comments and a few other the ex-Juve players, how it was the Ronaldo FC for 3 years. Are we seeing a Ronaldo FC with United? And to get the best out of Ronaldo, it's ultimately not going to be that counter-attacking football, because like you look at Liverpool or United teams in the past that got results against, more so Manchester City, but still got results against Liverpool. They had the pace of Rashford. They had the pace of Martial on the break, and at least they had that pace. And even Cavani was pressing. And like maybe even bring this into more so the Jadon Sancho thing as well as Ronaldo, Sean, is like, can you see Ronaldo working under an OIe Gunnar Solskjaer team going forward? And then with more so, surely Jadon Sancho should be in the team because of his pace in the counter-attack of right wing. But in a game against Liverpool, I thought it was a perfect opportunity to play Jadon Sancho on the right wing.
Yeah, I mean, with someone like Sancho, I mean, it's clear he was probably always going to need time to settle. The Bundesliga players moving, especially in the last couple of years, haven't always settled very quickly. You look at Havertz and Werner, who've struggled. And Naby Keita came from Leipzig, and like an awful lot of them haven't hit the ground running. Now Jadon Sancho's back to a city he knows well because he was at Man City when he was younger, but it just hasn't clicked for him. And when your team's losing and when your team's not playing well, and I read, I think it was comments, so there was someone saying that Sancho was so used to having triggers at Dortmund for when to press that he's come to United and it's a little different, and he has to get used to that style of play. And maybe he was a Liverpool signing, but the fee was too much for them. So there's all these questions with someone like Sancho. I do think Rashford's a big player for them, but the problem is United have so many players in that kind of wide forward area. You've Rashford, Greenwood, Cavani. There was a big deal about Cavani signing his year contract extension. Sancho, and then you even look at someone like Donny van de Beek, who's not playing. It's Pogba can play there. Fernandes, like, they've an embarrassment of riches, Jesse Lingard, and they can't get the right team out. They don't know who plays well, and they've no cohesion. You've just got players like Greenwood and Fernandes and Ronaldo who have to start every game, and effectively, whereas they aren't playing as well as maybe someone like a Lingard can do, and Lingard can come in and produce a moment like against West Ham earlier on the season. So there's a lot of questions for OIe Gunnar Solskjaer in that respect. And that'd be one thing I'd be extremely worried about, is that for all their flaws at the back, offensively at times they look really poor as well. Now they got they have quality to get them out of holes, like against Atalanta, but it's just not clicking up front either. And when you're that leaky at the back, it's almost gone to the Jurgen Klopp, not approach, but Jurgen Klopp at the start of his reign it almost felt like they had to score 3 goals to win a game. I think if you're Manchester United now, it almost feels like you need 3 goals to win a game as well. And that would be a worry. Are they going to fully click? So it's just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and it's just all the players you mentioned. Like, we've so many ways we can go with this, but like even seeing Donny van de Beek warming up after the game is over and doing his few shuttle sprints, and the more I kind of think of it, and yeah, Donny's got to accept that the games I watch, he hasn't played great, to be honest with you. I don't know if I've ever seen him play really well where I've gone, he deserves a start, but surely Ollie's management of Donny van de Beek is worrying, and I'm already seeing that trend a small bit with Jadon Sancho. And the fact that you have this McFred partnership that just seems in the big games, they don't seem to have the quality to get on the ball enough, that you could argue Donny van de Beek's been given a rough time of it. Put it this way, if a new manager came in, I can't see how Donny van de Beek doesn't get more playing time than he is currently. And then when you're saying that, then you got to think there's something a little bit personal going on, or maybe Ollie just has it in his head that this player doesn't fit into my systems, whatever way I do it. But surely he's better than what's been offered at the moment. Well, to be honest with you, any of the 11 players that didn't play, that were watching the other 11 players start there on Sunday, would say the same. But I really think Donny van de Beek, again, I'm not saying he's like this world-class player and it's like the biggest crime of all time that he's not playing, but I think the fact he hasn't got more minutes is probably not good enough from Ollie's point of view, and there has to be something else going on there, that he's just decided that he's not good enough for this United team.
Yeah, the Van de Beek thing, I think, stinks of. He wasn't my signing, so I'm not going to play him. I don't want anything to do with him. And when you have that, it's never a good sign. It's this real kind of coach where just going to leave him lying idle. I don't want him. This sort what happened with Mourinho with different clubs, but happened with Ronald Koeman, I think, a new man he asked at Everton, where it's kind of like not bullying in a way, but it almost is. It's kind of shadowing. It's like, I don't want him, so he's not part of my plans. I'm not going to give him a chance. And when you're Donny van de Beek, who at the time was one of the most sought after young central midfielders in European football, having been a part of that Ajax team that got to a Champions League semi-final and so close to a final, they're coming to Manchester United. It just obviously hasn't worked. At times he's played well in patches, but every time he plays, he seems to be taken off after 60 odd minutes, or it's just, he's really struggling, Donny van de Beek. And he's at the stage now where I don't think it's ever going to work for him at Manchester United. I don't think it's ever going to work for him with OIe Gunnar Solskjaer. So whether it happens in January when he gets a loan move, or it happens in the summer, but he's sitting there on good wages, and the most frustrating thing for him is he's not playing, and that will hurt his career, I think, in the future. But it also leaves another question mark at Solskjaer's door.
It's one of them, Sean. Like, if Donny starts the next game against who have they got, Tottenham, and has a 9 out of 10, Ollie's probably arguably in more of a sackable position. The fact he's let this man not play for, you know what I mean? So I think there's almost that stubbornness where Ollie's gone too far down this road, that if he's in a lose-lose situation, if he brings him back in, I think on that side of things. But maybe get into a little bit more, but maybe like the final individual player, Sean, before we move on to a little bit of Sky Sports coverage and some of the good stuff there, like Harry Maguire. And actually, this touches on a little bit of Sky Sports coverage, because I actually only saw this tweet today, but we might as well, it's been doing the rounds that Rafa van der Vaart made a comment on Sky Sports covering a Tottenham game, that he said Harry Maguire, when they saw him playing for England just before United signed him, they're like, he was worst player on the pitch, in his words. And then the week later, he couldn't believe that he went for 80 million from Leicester to Manchester United. And Jamie Redknapp said something on the lines of, that's you Dutch are very honest sort of thing. But it was put on the tweet. I haven't fact checked this or anything, that he hasn't been on Sky since. But is that point that there's a small bit of protection over Harry Maguire? And is this a little bit harsh now that he's only coming back from injuries, but his performances have dipped? Like, I thought at times last season he was a bit of a leader in that United team, but maybe on reflection, maybe it's just not quite good enough at that level. And when you're getting sold by 80 million or for 80 million, unfortunately, you are going to be compared to Virgil van Dijk, when he is the level. Harry Maguire is so far below that, it's untrue. Even the way he clashed into Luke Shaw on Sunday just kind of showed that.
Yeah, well, I think with Maguire, like, him and Shaw have had such a long journey with England, playing every game of the Euros. Well, I think Shaw missed one and Maguire missed the start of it. But to play that long into the summer and to be immediately put back into the Premier League side and not have that luxury of being eased back, and that's what Guardiola's done well. He's eased Foden and Sterling back, and John Stones hasn't played a lot of minutes. I think Kyle Walker's the only one that he really rushed back in. So that's a big thing for United. They signed Varane late in the day, or the kind of deal got done late, and he was announced at the Leeds game, and it's just they haven't formed a partnership yet either, and you're still looking at Maguire and Lindelof. It's just problems, and they haven't worked. They've been disappointing, and that would leave you worrying as well, because Harry Maguire is someone that he's not getting any younger. He's been playing around the leagues for a number of years. And Varane, who is 29 himself, I think, he's signed for the here and now, and they have to form a partnership fairly quickly, because if they don't, then you are looking at it and wondering, things like that just aren't going to work for OIe Gunnar Solskjaer. And there's that kind of famous brand that He's a kind of the box style defender where he'll head everything out, he'll get his in front of the ball, but when he's on the half turn and when people like Mo Salah and Jota have room to run at them, he gets eaten alive. And it happened during the Euros a few times. I think it was Kai Havertz against England in the World Cup quarterfinal or last 16 game, where he had the ball and I was shouting at the telly, take on Maguire. It was a one-on-one. I think he went to pass to Werner. And you could see the fear of Maguire, that he just didn't want that one-on-one with him because he was exposed. I think Sterling gave away the ball, and just that kind of when you've someone like Maguire there, and you want your fullbacks like Shaw and Wan-Bissaka to get forward, and you play Pogba there, and there's only one holding midfielder, and you're exposed, and you're at the halfway line. Harry Maguire can get found out and has been found out, and I kind of feel for him in a way, because he had quite a good Euros, and England were very pragmatic and they had those two sit midfielders in. He's come back to United and it's almost been a free for all, and he's been caught out at times, and he came back against Leicester and he obviously wasn't fit, and he got an injury at the end of last season, I think at the Villa game, and he's just had a few issues. But I think when you're 80 million, of course you get judged like that, and when you see what Liverpool spent for Van Dijk, and I remember a lot of people were kind of scratching their heads thinking 70 million for a centre half, and he was a huge part in them winning the league and Champions League. And Harry Maguire is a United captain and has been for a couple of years now. And I kind of fell for him in that interview as well, because it's a horrendous place for a captain to be, and there's nothing to be gained from it. But it just feels like, not that he's out of his depth, but him and Lindelof just don't work, and we've known that for a year or so. And Varane not being 100% since he signed has been a problem with that.
Yeah, and I actually take a lot of those points. Maguire's he's been unlucky last few months, but there is nothing to be gained in those interviews. I know it seems that just the United fans I follow, they seem to have turned a small bit on him, so you do kind of feel bad. Jim, a Spurs fan, is slightly bit harsh. Who's better, Harry Maguire or Fridge? It is those kind of jokes, and I think a lot of as I said, United fans are possibly turning on him a small bit, Sean, to be honest with you. But like you said, if he's perfect position, as Paul Merson says, is in the middle of a back three. Although at times I think he was on the left, wasn't he? And John Stones was in the middle in that England team, and the two holding midfielders. But look, a lot of the good stuff we can get to now, Sean, on Gary Neville. And speaking of United fans, they're turning on a lot of people here. So they've been turning on Harry Maguire. They seem to be turning on Gary Neville. I did get a bit of a sense that Gary needed to put the phone down earlier today, judging by his Twitter and the amount of tweets he was getting out. But this all falls back to his refusal to kind of put all the blame on OIe Gunnar Solskjaer. And look, to a point, that's fair enough. But I just think United fans are struggling with the fact that a couple of weeks ago, I know Gary tweeted saying that, he's got that personal relationship with OIe Gunnar Solskjaer. And that's effectively, I'm paraphrasing, but that is affecting his thinking, and he would never call for a manager to be sacked. And Jamie Carragher says the same thing as well. He'd never call for a manager to be sacked. And I understand that to a point, but we got to be real here. This isn't like talking about the man in the street losing their job. Like, these guys are getting well paid off. Steve Bruce got well paid off. I wouldn't lose any sleep over the abuse, albeit some of that abuse is way too far in the personal attack. But by and large, someone asking for a manager to be sacked shouldn't be seen as abuse on an individual, to be honest with you. But I do take the point that with that, other people bring it too far. On the Gary Neville side of things, what were your thoughts on Sky Sports coverage in general? It's enjoyable after that, when the four lads are sitting in the studio together. I love it. It was just missing Roy Keane, obviously. But on Gary Neville's side of thing, where are you with him? Because there's a lot of ways we can go with this one, I think.
Yeah, I listened to it back. For those that don't know, Sky released it as a podcast. The post-match coverage and post-match discussion. So I listened to it back without watching the audio, watching what they were doing.
That must be different, is it?
Yeah, it's weird when they kind of go at each other, and it's quite funny because it feels like you're listening in on people chatting at the bar. But my take on Gary Neville's in a very difficult position, and Manchester United have just been probably one of the worst results in certainly since their 6-1 defeat to City. But the manner of the defeat, the struggle they've had so far this season, having signed who they've signed in the summer, and Liverpool effectively signing no one really. I know they bought in Kanate, and they've that thing that they've no money but they're still in the league, that kind of idea. And they've spent all this money on their team. You look at Wan-Bissaka, who they paid big money for, Lindelof, Maguire, Shaw a couple of years ago. So they're filled with big money signings. And like, if you're Gary Neville, it must be like torture watching that, considering where Manchester United have been. And I think everyone knows that OIe Gunnar Solskjaer is under pressure. He hasn't got a CV to back himself up. And Gary Neville was, like I said, stuck in a rock in a hard place, and he'd no Roy Keane there to kind of cover his back. And if you're Gary Neville, I mean, you're furious, but you can't ultimately blame it fully at OIe Gunnar Solskjaer's door, because he is your mate, and that is fair enough. And you don't want to lose friends over it. It is a difficult position to be in, and he has always. He's never wanted a manager to be sacked. But like, when you lose 5-0 to Liverpool, I don't think he'd have a leg to stand on.
Well, just on that, like, he hasn't asked for a manager to be sacked, and he was kind of taking that high road with a few people today, saying he'd never get personal side of things. He fully blamed Paul Pogba for a lot of Manchester United and French performances, so he's happy to do that and happy to lay the blame on individual players. He's made a lot of comments to Arsenal defenders in the past, David Luiz, Mustafi, they're uncoachable. Like, to me, that's a lot worse than asking for a manager to be sacked. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy with him kind of going on his high horse today. And my problem with Gary Neville, as you know, Sean, is he made a comment maybe 18 months ago saying to Jamie, well, you obviously watched Liverpool this season. I haven't, after 10 or 11 games in the Premier League. And I was going, hold on a second, there's staggered kickoffs. Are you not watching the games? And he was working on United games last season, and this season they've switched that around with him and Carra. They're now doing the opposition. So he's watched a lot more what he would say at the opposition teams. But I got from that, like, he's got other stuff going on. Like, he's running the hotel chain. He's a lot of good businesses, and that's fine and all. But when you're the highest paid, as I think he is anyway, the highest paid football pundit in the country, and you're just not watching football unless you're working on the game, you're kind of out of touch with that. And then you're kind of making comments off the back of that. I think that frustrates and winds people up. And when you're on the TV, sticking up for your mates, like, we can all do that. Like, I'll jump on and stick up for my mates, like, but I'm not getting paid like millions and millions a year to go on Sky Sports, and I'm not representing basically the whole club here in that Sky Sports studio. So I do think it's fair for Manchester United fans to be very frustrated, not just with what Gary's saying on the TV, but then on his Twitter to have a pop and kind of put himself above everyone else. I do think it's a thing where he doesn't watch football unless he's working on it. And over the last 18 months, you can kind of get that sense. He keeps referencing his time at Valencia and his time at Salford, and then saying there, like, because of his experience that they brought a coach in with Valencia with a month ago, it didn't work. It never works, he says. And then the second thing he said was Salford City was that, I sacked a manager after 6 games and it was the wrong decision. Yeah, well, Chelsea sacked Frank Lampard at the end of mid last season and they ended up winning the Champions League. So I just think he's in a world of his own at times. I do think Jamie Carragher's a lot more. He watches football. He actually said in that overlap interview that he only watches football. And I do think you do see their punditry trajectory going one way, whereas I would always have had Gary Neville ahead of Carragher. I just much prefer to listen to Carragher now because I go to him. If he's having a pop at Arsenal players, I'm like, at least he's actually watched Arsenal this season, where Gary outside the games would have barely caught the highlights, to be honest with you. I guarantee you that. I just get that sense that he doesn't, outside of, because he's so busy in his life, which is fair enough. But I go back to the point that you can't be the best paid commentator and pundit and then go about sticking up for your mates while also not watching that much football as well.
Yeah, like he's at the stage now with it, I think, with his Sky thing, and I think this week as well, where he's probably, I know he can't pay good money, but I'd say I don't know how long more he's going to do punditry, and he's always kind of expressed that he doesn't want to do it for that long. I think you're right. I think Jamie Carragher is one of the best pundits out there. I think he probably would have learned a lot from obviously being sacked from Sky and wanting to come back and all that kind of thing. Like I must say, like, and we've seen it in GA, we've seen it in other sports, like cricket and rugby, where if you're commenting on your own county in a hurling or a football game, it's always really hard to find that balance. Do you overly criticize to make sure you're not biased, or do you protect your friendships with people? So it's not an easy position to be in, and that's why it's very hard to be a pundit and to still be respected. And I think a lot of people have struggled with that and lost friendships over it, and we've seen it in Irish sport, and I'm sure Stephen Kenny would have lost a few of his, what would be, not say big friendships, but people he thought had his back or maybe respected him, and he's lost. And that's just the world of punditry. That's the world of sport. But it is a difficult position, I'd imagine, to comment on your old club, on comment on your old, your old assistant coach in Mike Phelan, your old teammate in Carrick and Solskjaer, and like it's hard because I think the whole world can see that Solskjaer at the moment isn't the right man, or at the moment maybe doesn't have the credibility or the credentials to take the United job further. And I think he's brought it to a point. He referenced in his interview that we've come so far as a group to kind of end now, where I think they've come so far, and maybe that is as far as they go. And if you're like, I must say, I do think it's going to be hard for Gary Neville to kind of get there. Now, that being said, he goes on, he does like an old tangent and goes on a rant and things, but he was up against the Tunis and Carragher, I think, kind of.
Yeah,
Michael.
He was kind of thrown like 2-on-1. A couple of comments, Sean. We'll just finish on Gary. Harry Dean from Navan saying, "Is it now the general consensus that Manchester is blue just like London?" No, we're actually, me personally was very happy with Friday night. Harry, thank you very much, and high hopes that 4-4 F2 will do the job for us over the season, but who knows? I do want one question asked before we go, Sean. Do remind me. Ollie wouldn't get the Norwich job from Tim Stokes, Manchester United fan, who, in fairness, like when all this hype, and now it was just before Ronaldo signing, but Tim did come on the podcast and he just said he was finished with Ollie, and I think Tim was at a point where a lot of United fans are now. So I guess to a point Tim would be correct, although I think he got a bit carried away with the Ronaldo sign like the rest of us. And so did I, to be fair. I thought United would really challenge for the league this season. But the last thing on Neville, Sean, again, I don't want to repeat the point, but it is frustrating for fans to, and in fairness, Gary, he holds his hand up saying he's mates with OIe Gunnar, he's mates with Carrick, Fletcher, Mike Phelan, like you said. But like, he's paid to do a job, and it is like the guy, their own county, and everyone can see it. But it is still unfair then to kind of put yourself above everyone else, saying what I say is gospel. And he does, even the way he's kind of talking to Souness and Carragher, he couldn't believe he thought they were kind of coming out the wrong end of it. But I would be fuming as a United fan if Gary Neville's personal relationships are affecting what he's saying on the punditry side of things. But look, I guess that's the way of the world, and that's the way it is. But I always think when Gary first came on, he was my favorite pundit. The way he, breath of fresh air, I thought he was. The way he spoke, his commentary is still the best. He's got a great voice for it. His punditry is amazing. M&F is still the best show on telly, especially in a football sense. But it's just frustrated me the way he's gone. He did a second captain's thing, had a few pops of Ken Early, nothing in a bit of crack, and then the off the ball thing, albeit Joe Malloy was probably, kept that thing going a little bit too long. You get the sense from, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I always got the sense that Gary speaks a little bit down to presenters. Dave Jones, he always had a good relationship. I've seen signs in the last few months that he just kind of talks down a small bit to him as well. So there's just a few things I don't like. I think he's getting a little bit talk down sort of thing to not just football fans, but to people he's on TV with as well. So I don't know. It's turned a little bit, I think, on him. But again, you wouldn't get a bigger Gary Neville fan than me maybe 18 months ago, I'd say.
I do agree. I think that whole, I think him and Roy Keane came out of the off the ball roadshow. They did very badly, and I think they probably both didn't realize how big the audience became. Particularly Roy Keane, I think. Yeah, I mean that's showbiz, baby, as Eamon Dunphy would say.
Well, it is showbiz, and look, joke aside, I know I'm getting a bit wound up by Neville, but it's great telly, to be honest with you. And even just sitting there, Sean, watching the four lads talking, and we did, you did kind of look at it going, where's Roy Keane? Did Jermaine Defoe get drafted in last minute as a replacement? But you were saying that to me, Sean, then I was like, well, he surely wouldn't have been able to get off the Rangers game, considering he is a player coach. And you said to me, like, he still plays for Rangers. I go, well, he did at the start of the season, and then I tuned out a bit from Rangers. Like, I do keep an eye on Celtics results, all right. But yeah, what do you think, maybe first of all, on a pundit not going to watch his team or play? I don't know the situation there, but probably just shows you the few bob they're getting.
Yeah, well, I think it would have been hilarious. I think it was probably the easiest job in punditry ever, because you've got Souness, Carragher, and Neville, and it was a bit of like the Carragher and Neville Monday night show for a while. They were just popping ideas off each other, and
yeah,
you've Defoe, who just literally all you have to do was point out the basics and say, well, look, they're not pressing here, they're not pressing there, and he probably got paid 20 grand for every word he spoke throughout the afternoon. But yeah, when I saw him, I couldn't. It kind of registered with me. I was like, but presume Rangers aren't having this, and they were playing, and you wouldn't know what the story is there. It happened in, I think Brendan Cummins was the Kerry hurling selector, and he missed a championship game to commentate on the Tipperary Munster Championship. I think he commentated for RTE anyway. It's a weird old thing to see that. I always find it weird when players that are still playing, when Sky used to get players when they were injured into the punditry studio, and we all know what happened when Roy Keane gave his punditry when he got his P45 and Manchester United.
Yeah, but and one thing that springs to mind, I think Wooly always reminds Desi Dolan that he missed. I don't know if it was a senior final, but I think it was a big game, senior championship, because he was getting paid to be up in the Sunday game and on the highlight show. But because he was on the highlight show, he has to go to the game. So therefore, he missed the game in the afternoon. And my source here is Wooly Parkinson a couple of years ago. So who knows how good a source that is. But yeah, it was a bit strange. Now, obviously, Defoe's played for West Ham Spurs, so he's the perfect man for that game. But Jesus, like, it's United Liverpool all over 4:30. Something's going to happen in a 0-0 game, and they'd all be giving out about Jurgen Klopp or Liverpool. There was always something to talk about between the four of them. It was a surprise, all right, I thought. But Graham Souness as well. He seems, if anything, in the punditry game, I think he's getting better and better. He's looking great now. He's got the beard and all. A lot of people comment on his looks, but he's still, he just knows that suits him perfectly. He either sits back and lets Carragher and Neville have a pop at each other, or he joins in, and you see how he dominates a studio like that. It's, you can see the experience he brings to the punditry game.
Yeah, Souness is, he's been around for donkey's years, and I always think it's funny when Roy Keane, and I've heard Roy Keane and Dunphy both asked before who's the best pundit out there, and I think Dunphy always loves to mention Souness, and Roy Keane always says it. So he's got that kind of, he's a man's man, as they kind of say. He's
the pundit's pundit, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the pundit's pundit. He's the people's pundit. But yeah, it's like it was a weird one, because having listened to the analysis back, like 95% of it were how bad United were, and obviously so they've just been battered 5-0, but a lot more of it should have been said about how Liverpool have transformed themselves from last year, and that was my worry this year. Could they do it again? Obviously they were injuries last year, but they're coming back, and honestly it feels as if they're as good as ever, and they've got Mo Salah in the form of his life, and that was when Liverpool were playing well and when they won the league and Champions League, it was more the front three. Mane dominated games. Firmino had his moments, but now it's just all about Salah. It's like Liverpool are the Salah show. And even when they won the Premier League, you were mentioning Van Dijk and Alisson. Now it's literally Mo Salah. It's he is dominating everything. We ran a poll on our Instagram and 76% that answered 59 said that Mo Salah was the best player on the planet. And I don't disagree with them. Now, the key for me is I think there's levels to Premier League greatness. I think certainly you've got people like Ronaldo and Henry, who I think both had probably 2 or 3 year periods in the Premier League where they would probably the best player in the world, best player in the league, and their numbers, their goals would destroy people. Now you have Salah, who his current form this year, is on a par with what Ronaldo did and Henry did in those couple of years in the Premier League. So I think if he continues this form, there's no question that he becomes when he gets into that discussion of the top 5 best players to ever play in the Premier League. He's playing that well, he's flying, and he looks like there's no sign of relenting. And obviously, I see the comment mentioned there about the African Cup of Nations potentially being a hazard for Liverpool. I mean, Mo Salah is becoming the best player in the world, and Mbappe hasn't had, ever since what happened at the Euros, missing the penalty with Mbappe, and Haaland is at a stage in his career where he's still probably learning the game, and he's not at one of the top clubs. And Ajax trounced off Dortmund in the week in the Champions League. So there was always going to be a gap between Ronaldo and Messi in the years after, and who was going to take over the mantelpiece. And obviously, you have someone like Lewandowski, who's one of the favourites for the Ballon d'Or, or the best awards, or whatever it's called. I think Salah's definitely entered that conversation because his form at the moment, you saw it in the week against Atletico Madrid. It's just the Salah show, and he's he is properly flying.
Yeah, and one thing, as you were talking, I guess the one concern for Liverpool, aside from the African Cup of Nations, which whatever about Liverpool, and to be honest with you, out of the top 3, it's going to affect Liverpool most. But I think Arsenal we're in massive trouble. Just I think 4 big players, although Elneny's one of those 4, but like Aubameyang, Partey, it's just a bit of a disaster for Arsenal as well. And if one of those teams goes far, I think you're missing up to 6 Premier League games is the talk. But I guess the concern for Liverpool, and maybe it isn't a concern because they've got Jadon now, but I did think it was telling that Sadio Mane was left out. And I know he's got back amongst the goals recently, but I guess for a long time he hasn't quite been at it in terms of, and I'm talking about Sadio Mane standards, but like you said, Sean, the year Liverpool won the title, I'd say Mane and Salah were pretty level in terms of Matt Salah obviously got more goals because he took penalties, but by and large they're as influential as each other, maybe slightly towards Salah. But I guess that might be a slight concern, Mane, but at the same time for Liverpool, because I do want to talk a small bit about Liverpool here for a couple of minutes, that I guess looking at that, if they can give Mane a few weeks off here, because he hasn't had a break by and large all the way through. He's always had to play. The fact they had Jota now, and maybe it was just for the big game against United, but if they can play Jota a small bit more, but also play Bobby Firmino as well, and that gives Sadio Mane a small bit of rest, and he'll be looking at Salah going, I was on a par with this lad maybe a year ago, and now this man's the best player in the world, and I can't get into the Liverpool team. I think maybe that might help, but obviously he of course will be missing the African Cup of Nations too.
Yeah, and like I think the thing with Mane is you always felt like Mane was maybe overachieving, and like he was, for a while he was probably my favorite player in the Premier League. I think a lot of people agree he's that, that energy, and he's just lost his way slightly. But with Salah, like he was performing so well, but it's just gone up a gear. But you looking at it now, it feels like he hasn't changed a lot. He's just maybe timing it. He's making those runs better. He's making more runs. He's more hungry to score goals, to emulate the goal scoring charts that Ronaldo and Kane have hit in recent years. But there's no question Mo Salah has transformed that role, in particular that kind of wide striker off the right. And that's what really annoys me in fantasy, how he's a midfielder. That really drives me up the wall. I didn't captain him this week, and I haven't captained him for a few weeks this season, and every time he does, he seems to get a hat-trick. So he's an extraordinary player, and he's hitting that level of Henry and Ronaldo, and people like that have. And the question mark is, can he do it throughout the whole season? And in particular, can Liverpool win another trophy? Because I think if they win one this year, I think it would really stamp not only their legacy as a team, but Jurgen Klopp's, because it kind of hit me on Sunday afternoon, looking at the result and seeing everything after the game, how big a job Jurgen Klopp's done at Liverpool. I mean, it's probably been underappreciated by people. There was a time when Klopp initially, they weren't flying necessarily, and he had a lot of the old Brendan Rodgers team, and he had a lot of players that he had to find a way out of the club, like Sacco and people like that. And obviously the sale of Coutinho and what he's done is off the Richter scale with this Liverpool side. And you look at the players United have and the two lineups, and I think someone commented that on our Instagram poll. If you look at the two lineups, you'd probably take United's before kickoff over Liverpool. But when you look at how well coached Liverpool are, you look at what Jurgen Klopp's done there. I mean, there's no doubt. You know, you take Jurgen Klopp over Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and you take Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool over Solskjaer's United, and he's just a freak. Salah, he really is.
Yeah, well, Salah and Connor's commenting just set and forget Salah's captain, and you know you got, that's the basics of fantasy. But unfortunately, I got 93 points in fantasy, but I didn't have Salah as captain, so I've literally left 23 points after me. And to say I was absolutely fuming is an understatement on the Salah side of things. Like I was genuinely red all over. Like, it's so angry because I've done so well. I'm putting a lot of time into my FPL this year, and it's just not happening. John Tracy comments, can't forget the difference Alisson has made as well. And even to your point, Sean, you know, everyone's talking again now. It's the Salah show, but Van Dijk's come back, and even games like that game where Van Dijk had a relatively comfortable afternoon, he's back from that long-term injury. There's been a couple of moments where, like, again, you're probably saying this because of the injury, that, you know, this gives him a perfect time to come back. But you also can't forget, you know, Alisson made a save. I think it was 3-0 watching the highlights back this morning. Big moments. But and maybe just on the point, final point United, Sean, maybe before you get on the Instagram poll side of things, that, you know, is there a danger that you can never overreact enough, in my opinion, to a 5-0 defeat to your biggest rivals? But look, they did lose 6-1 to Spurs last season. Bruno did have the chance of 0-0. And if he does score that goal, the crowd, in fairness, was a great atmosphere there. They go 1-0 up. This Liverpool team, you know, have been leaking goals to the back before the game. I don't know if it fit. I think Liverpool still win the game, but it doesn't finish 4 or 5-1, in my opinion, anyway. I think that you can underestimate the difference of first goal make. That's an obvious thing to say. But the next 6 games are Spurs away, Atalanta away, City home, Watford away, Villarreal, and then Chelsea away. Both of those games away. You know, Ollie's pulled it out of the bag before. Is there danger that there's been an ever so slight overreaction based on the fact that he's been here before? Maybe not to this extent, but he's always gone back. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate a small bit, but that Bruno chance goes in.
Well, they're playing a Tottenham side that are, you know, the two sides are meeting that are both kind of lost their way this season, and Tottenham under Nuno have struggled. I fear for the City game. I think when they get to City, Pep Guardiola, the only thing that could happen is Pep Guardiola does it and tries to do something that has happened before. But I think City will walk them off the park. And I know it's been said before, and their recent record maybe isn't the best against United, but I think like Liverpool, United will approach that differently. I think they'll sit off City, but City will just toy with them. They'll just keep the ball in midfield. They won't overcommit, or they shouldn't overcommit. And that could really be a telling time. I think it's 6 big games for Solskjaer. I think, look, it has to go well. I've always maintained that the United board, were going to hide behind the manager in a way. They were going to put him out. He's the cold face. He's going to take all the brunt of our criticism, because as soon as United's sack Solskjaer, the attention will turn from the pitch back to the Glazers out movement and the green and gold. And by keeping Ole Gunnar Solskjaer there is that element, that connection with the old United, and the Glazers can sit in Florida and look out the window and think it's a little bit more rosier. Then we don't want any of this on us. I mean, we don't want people storming through the ground again. We don't want the Glazers out. We've no intention of selling, so we're going to keep Solskjaer in, and we're going to give him more money in January, and they'll probably buy some sort of centre defensive mid who they can get their hand on for unbelievable price. So Solskjaer, I think is pretty safe in his ways, but I think it could turn nasty in these next 6 games. I think they're the big one. I think Tottenham on Saturday. I think if they win that, there'll be an element of anything can happen from there, and they can beat Atalanta, and then they can beat City, and all of a sudden, Solskjaer's got his mojo back, and the
Yeah.
United players have it back. But it's so volatile at the minute that if they lose to Tottenham, you'd you could you could see how nasty it would get the following Sunday against Man City. I think it would really be it'd be a difficult environment, and it'll be an awful way for a club legend, the person who scored the winner to bring the Champions League back to United. I think it would just get a little bit ugly.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gary Neville's tweet. Can't believe if you told me in 1999 we'd be turning on him 22 years later. I thought it was a brilliant tweet. Anything else from the Instagram post, Sean, before we finish up?
Yeah, so 71% of the people that voted, so I think we had at the time about 80 or 90 votes. 61% or 61 people wanted him out. So that 71% wanted OIe Gunnar Solskjaer to not be at the wheel. And to be fair, a lot of the 25 people were Arsenal fans or Liverpool fans. So just people having a bit of crack.
Taking
But
the
there was a
piss,
lot of comments in the Football Bets 4 Up podcast said it was an embarrassing. Paddy Talks Golf says he wants OIe in, but you can feel the pressure coming, and having two managers like Conte and Zidane free, who I think Zidane would be a pretty good fit at Manchester United. Whether it comes to there was some other ones from Morgan said Conte would be bad. He thinks Conte would be bad for United, Morgan Ryan, but OIe Gunnar Solskjaer should see out the season. Maybe to bring a bit of stability. And Tim Stokes says it's all on the manager. He's the one. So there's a lot of varying things. It does feel like there is still a bit of goodwill with OIe Gunnar Solskjaer and the United fans, that they do want him to do well, and having spoken to a few, they want it to be a success so badly. They want nothing more than OIe Gunnar Solskjaer to bring the Premier League back to Manchester United. And obviously it's well documented. Fergie had a difficult run at the start of his United managerial run, but that goodwill only gets you so far, and the performances and that result in particular will be staring on a page in front of you 5-0. It'll be remembered for quite a while, and whether it will remain as OIe Gunnar Solskjaer's last game or the final blow remains to be seen. But whatever happens, that result, I think there'll always be that mark over Solskjaer as manager, and people will always refer to that, even if he's still in the job in 3 or 6 months time. That performance, that result of what can happen, and like there'll always be this thing now that the players don't want him, or the players will turn on him. I'm not sure how true it is, but the core Manchester United fans, the matchgone fans, still want Solskjaer, and while he's still there, they'll still support him. And that goodwill, like I said, will only get you so far, and it will if it does turn toxic, and it will, then it'll be an awful shame to what was a really good appointment by Manchester United. They took a big gamble on him, and it has worked to a stage where they got to second. They've been in the Champions League the last number of years. But I said at the time, I thought the Europa League was massive for them. I thought they had to win it, and that opened up a few cracks, and they just couldn't get over the line against Villarreal. And they had the better team, the way more money, better, all this infrastructure, whatever, and they couldn't get it done against them. And maybe it is, as Sean commented there, Sean Tracy, it is time to go for OIe. But I'd still love to see him do well and kind of prove people wrong. There is that element in me.
Well, they'd be proving you wrong as well. Just
yeah, to be
yeah,
proving me wrong, and him to have that smile and punching the Stretford end. But I can't see a world where they finish above Liverpool or Chelsea or United in the next while.
It is tough to watch because you can see United fans are now at the stage where, not too dissimilar to the Wenger era, but again, Wenger won us all these trophies. Like OIe, they're just holding on to this promise of OIe in the United way, and it's the ghost of Fergie sort of thing.
Well, that's where it could get toxic over the next 6 games. That's where we could really see the divide open up, and that's something that Manchester United probably don't want more than anything. That's not what the Glazers want at all. They don't want anything to fuel up anger amongst their supporters even more. But I think the City game, if they get battered by City, I think it will start to turn toxic. And what that will bring to United, I just think will set them back quite a while as well. Because whatever said, when Ollie was doing well with United and they had that Champions League night in PSG and did some really good results, and even last year everyone was all in on Ollie and the feel good factor around United was back. But now it does feel like it can get toxic, and if it does, I think that will set United back a couple of years as well.
I did have a question on Arsenal, which to be honest got carried away. I can't remember it. It would have been something on the lines of 4-4 fucking 2, Sean. Is that been the answer the whole time with Mikel Arteta, or have I just got carried away again and we're going to lose 2-1 to Leicester in the early kickoff?
No, it was a good win for Arsenal, and I think it's similar to United, where after Ferguson, after Wenger, United and Arsenal both lost their ways with some of the players they were playing and the signings, and the managers didn't fit the club really. And now United, particularly last season, got a side that were quite likeable. You would have liked a lot of those players when Maguire and Shaw were playing well, and obviously Fernandes coming in. I think Arsenal are at that stage now where they signed a lot of players that you don't mind seeing play for Arsenal. I think a lot of them are good players. They're going to become good players. Whether they get Arsenal back to the top 4, I think will definitely remain to be seen. But I think it's as big as United's next few games are. I think it's a big few games for Arsenal to try and get close to United, and maybe even potentially, I think it's a long way off with how good West Ham and teams like that have been, and Tottenham are still there, to kind of put yourself back into a top 4 race, and even just a couple of good performances and try and get through November and Christmas, and be in a hunt for the top 4 into the latter stages of the season and into the new year will be an improvement for Arsenal, because the last 2 years their European their league finish has been really poor, and they've been out of any sort of race for the top, the Champions League by January or February. So I think that's the key over the next few months to get to the new year and still be close to some of these teams. And United have a tricky run of fixtures, but they've been good against those kind of sides before. But I've no real complaints with that Arsenal team on Friday night. Yeah. And by the way, I called Smith Rowe. My God, he's some footballer, and I think it just shows that, like, you forget how good England are and how much attacking options they have. They've Mount got a hat-trick on the weekend. Phil Foden is flying. Rashford's back. Greenwood, Harry Kane, Sterling. They've just Grealish, unbelievable.
Smith Rowe, 0 caps.
Yeah, attacking player and players, and they still have Southgate in charge, who might just hold them back from winning something. And it's almost like with Southgate, to me, it's almost as if he's similar to Solskjaer, and he's taken maybe he has taken England as far as they can, and he's changed the dynamic, and that's what Ollie's done a little bit. And maybe has he taken them as far as he can? And maybe the question can be asked with Southgate, and they need someone in to just add the finishing touches. And I think United and England could be similar in that regard.
Yeah, and England, like, I do think that was the chance, the Euros, because this Spain team, watching that Nations League, Spain will be there, France will be there. I just think that England had it. They had it won. They had Italy beat 1-0 up. Just find a way to see it out. Do you know what I mean? But listen, Sean, appreciate you coming on. Look, we be all night talking about other teams. We wanted to focus United, Liverpool, but do appreciate you listening. If you missed any of the podcast, it will be available on your prepared podcast app after the show. At Tackling Sport, you can get us on social media. We're going on once a week here now on Monday night, so tend to be a weekend review and a few interviews thrown in over the next few months. We're pretty excited. That's all from me, Sean. That's my thanks to Sean.
Cheers, Dan.
And thanks to everyone for listening. Do follow us on your preferred podcast app. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. And if not, we will chat to you next week. Have a great week.